Good morning, everybody. So glad to see everyone here. I'm Janet Elliott. Normally, I'd be coming to you from Sacramento, California, which is where I live and work. Today, in true work from anywhere fashion, I'm coming to you from a hotel room in Santa Barbara because I'm on vacation. But thanks to the awesome cloud and virtual setup, I can speak from anywhere. So let's get started with my presentation for you. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about zero to PD1, mindset, motivation, mastery, and mentor. A little bit about myself first. I have been a technical program manager for about 10 years. Currently, and the reason I'm on vacation is I'm between positions. I've got a new position coming up as a solution architect. PD1 played a big part in that. And I'm going to be starting it soon. So that's going to be announced soon. I'm going to be working for a Salesforce partner starting in July. Really excited about that. I'm 7 times Salesforce certified application architect. I was a platform champion. Um, from 2020 to 2021. They just recently retired that program. As Brad mentioned, I'm the leader of the Sacramento Salesforce Women in Tech Trailblazer Community Group and co-founder of Sacramento Salesforce Saturday. I'm super active on all the social channels. So if you'd like to connect with me on Twitter, I've put my handle up and also LinkedIn. So let's dive in. Today, we're going to talk about how to go from a non-coding background to skilling up through a journey through Platform Developer One certification. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the origin of this topic and why I decided to speak about it. 10 years ago, when I started with Salesforce, working on Salesforce, there was no trailhead. You had to figure things out on your own. I did not have a coding background, and I just dug in as an admin and doing consulting work. Um, Over time, as the platform has become more complex, I wanted to learn more and I really wanted to become an architect. And Platform Developer One is a hurdle you have to get over to do that. And so I joined the cohort of Rad Women Code, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and became really interested in learning how to code and just leveling up on that. And once I was able to go through my Platform Developer One journey, I I thought back, there's a lot of resources out there for the technical topics. But what I wanted to talk about was a little less technical and a little more holistic. The idea of coming from a non-coding background and having that confidence and the sort of stick to itiveness to stick with it to get your Platform Developer One certification. And also to let you know that you're not alone and that you can do it. So the 4 areas I'm going to talk about today are motivation. What is your personal motivation? There are a lot of reasons why you might want to take Platform Developer One or learn about the topics, but it's important to identify your motivation. What is your mindset? As I will talk about, it is not a linear learning journey. You have to have a really positive mindset and know what you're going for. So you need to think about your mindset. Mastery. I'm going to talk about what resources are available, which resources I used, and where to start. Sometimes if you're coming from a non-coding background, you don't even know where to start. So I will talk about that. And then mentor. A mentor was a really big part of my journey, and I'm going to talk about what it means to work with a mentor, how to find a mentor. As I note here, it takes a village. You don't have to go about this on your own. Some of the takeaways that I hope that you get from this presentation are a better sense of your personal motivation, the confidence to take on the PD1 path, and a framework for approaching the certification. So here is the new logo, Certified Platform Developer One, that we all look at and think, I want to do that. So I have some news for you. The good news is I know everyone on this call can do it. Everyone can do it, whether you're just starting with Salesforce or whether you've been an admin for 10, 15 years. You can absolutely do this. I do have a little bit of bad news though, just to be realistic. It is definitely going to take some work. And you have to know that going in. It's going to take some fortitude and some work to get through this. So, sort of knowing that up front, the good news and the bad news, that you can do it, but it's going to take some work. It's important to put that mindset together as you prepare to go on the journey. So, let's start with motivation. people have different motivations. There's a lot of different paths now in the Salesforce world that you can take, and PD1 impacts all of those paths. So maybe you're looking to actually become a full-time developer. Or maybe, like me, you're on a journey to the top of the pyramid to be an application or system architect. Maybe you just want to better understand the platform as an admin. Or maybe you're a business analyst or project manager and you want to be able to talk the talk. You're working maybe with outside consultants and they're talking about things and you want to really understand that. So there's lots of different reasons that people want to learn the framework of the Platform Developer One certification. What I'm curious about right now is, if you're on this call, is what is your motivation? If you're interested in taking on PD1, I'm interested in the chat what your motivation might be for thinking about taking on Platform Developer One. Are you thinking about it because you want to become a developer, or are you thinking architect, or what is your reason? If you have a second and want to throw that in the chat, I would love to hear from you and find out what your motivation is. I'll give everyone just a second if you want to share that, or maybe you're just listening to sort of see what what's this platform developer thing all about. Expanding Salesforce knowledge, definitely. And I will talk about the impact of this at the end. Is anyone looking to, become a full-time developer? Solution architect, understanding the integration of Salesforce with other applications. Awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of with the platform now is, as well as being an architect, perfect. Oh yeah, that's perfect, Unli. Hoping it will make Salesforce less frustrating when talking to an admin about what I'm looking for to complete my work. Oh, Evan, nice. Evan, I have faith that I think you could take on PD1 just from listening to your last presentation. Entry point. Okay, awesome. Oh, awesome. Okay, great. So there's lots of different reasons for taking it on, for sure. And again, at the end, I'm going to talk about the impact with it. It's huge. So it's good to know that, there's varying reasons that people want to take it on. And one of the reasons I'm asking that question is everyone who takes on PD1 doesn't necessarily want to become a full-time developer. That's not the only path that you can take with it. The PD1 certification isn't all about like writing triggers. There's a lot more to it. So I just wanted to use that to sort of point out that there's a lot of different reasons people take on PD1. Next, let's talk about motivation. And we talked about this a little bit in the chat there. So I just talk a little bit about my personal story. I have over 9 years on the Salesforce platform. And I've worked both sort of in consulting roles and internal roles. And I have a lot of experience with a strong group of developers, which has been awesome to learn from them, and also collaborating on a variety of use case and projects. So I've got a really broad spectrum of experience. Maybe not always a deep experience, but I've been exposed to a lot of different use cases and solutions. So that's really helped me learn from those. And I have a solid grasp of all the platform fundamentals, general best practices. I certainly don't know them all. And as we all know, some of the Salesforce idiosyncrasies, those always come up on certification tests. So sort of knowing those is really helpful going in. I would suggest that you be realistic that your background supports this journey. I think it would be hard to come into Salesforce, take your admin and maybe your platform app builder, and then just go directly to PD1. You could learn the mechanics of Platform Developer One, but there's nuances of Salesforce and also understanding how to apply the use cases that are going to be hard for you to grasp if you're just coming into the into the Salesforce world. You need at least, I would say, a couple of years of experience and your admin and platform app builder. The platform app builder is really going to come in handy. Certifications to be able to pursue this. So it's important to be realistic. My personal motivation was I don't want to become a full-time developer. That wasn't my motivation. I did want to take the next step in my architect journey, and just this, I don't know, it was a couple months ago I finished. I finished sharing and visibility in the data architecture, and then PD1 I took last year, so was able to become an application architect, and that was a huge achievement. Yeah, it was awesome. I don't know what else to say. It was really awesome to be able to do that. So I understand when people want to, do the architect journey. And also what helped me at the time as a project manager, I was working as a project manager and a solution architect sort of, is it helped me be able to better communicate with the developers. And we worked a lot with outside parties, third parties that we were integrating with, partners of ours. It helped me be involved in those conversations. I felt much more confident in understanding those conversations and asking questions instead of just being, sort of a project manager, paper pusher, scheduler. I was able to really dig into those solutions. So it really had an impact on me, and that was part of my motivation for going through it. So I know we all have our different motivations, but I just want to share a little bit about what my motivation was. If your motivation is just to up your cert count, like collecting certs, this is not going to be the one to do it with. It's a difficult certification, and it's not an automatic in to get a developer job just because you have Platform Developer 1. If you want to become a full-time developer, this is a good foundation. I would say it's not the end of your journey. Just passing Platform Developer 1 isn't automatically going to be a check mark into a developer job. I don't think it's deep enough in the hands-on to just straight go into being a developer, but it is a really good foundation for that. To become an architect, it's imperative. It's an imperative knowledge as we talk ahead here in just a minute about the layers of information that you need. It's imperative that you have this foundation. And if you just want to become an informed admin, project manager, or business analyst, I I know it sounds like hyperbole, but it's going to change your life because you're going to understand. It's like peeking behind the curtains. And before it was all a mystery, like how did these magical triggers happen and how does this happen? You'll understand it. And it is understandable once you break it down. So it will change your life. The next item I'd like to talk about is mindset. And I don't think in the Salesforce world we talk about this enough. We talk a lot about the technical preparation, but we don't talk enough about the mindset to go into these study journeys and how to sort of stick with it. So I liked this quote, all things are difficult before they are easy. And this was so true for me for my Platform Developer 1 journey. And we'll talk about why here in just a second. Platform Developer 1 is not like other certifications in my experience. I'm really good at studying. I'm really good at getting my notes out, going to some place like Focus on Force and just going through the outline step by step. Yes, I understand that. Very linear. Platform Developer 1 does not work like that if you come from a non-coding background. It's a lot of information, of course. It's not only information that you need to understand, but it's information that you just need to learn, if that makes sense. So right, you're going to need to learn about triggers and UI and Lightning Web Components and some hands-on stuff, but also concepts and theories. It's a lot to remember. Right, like I said, new concepts and language. So the most important thing that I had to learn after going through some frustrating, study times is that I had to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I had to be able to look through a topic and I'm not kidding when I say it just didn't make any sense. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to ever understand this. It's Greek to me. I don't know how I'm ever going to break this down. And that can be really frustrating. And maybe you skip over that, or maybe you think, oh, no, I just can't do this. I'm never going to understand this. And you're going to get frustrated. But what I found was, and if there's one thing you take away from this presentation, is that you have to have faith that your vague understanding of a topic is going to become clearer as you continue to pursue this. As I went to additional presentations or I went and talked to other developers, the same topics would come up. And I would slowly, as I heard people talking about it and another person talking about the same thing and another person, it slowly became clear to me. So the most important thing is don't get frustrated, because as you continue and you use different resources, I promise you that things will become clear. You are going to have like a eureka moment where all of a sudden it just clicks and you're like, oh, I get it now. I get it. Finding others to vent and share with is really important. As you know, with the Trailblazer community, there are lots of different groups, opportunities, forums to talk to people, share with people, realize that you're not alone in trying to go on this journey and maybe being frustrated in certain parts. That's really helpful mentally, to help with your mindset to keep going. Rad Women Code was a cohort that was, beginning coding, and we had a small group of women and some coaches, and just being able to be vulnerable with them. I remember we had a final project we had to do, and I was doing it with 2 other people, And I wrote to them and I said, I literally have no idea what to do next. I am just completely confused. And so people weren't coming from a sense of, hey, I know how to do this. I'm awesome. I can code. People were vulnerable and said, I don't understand this. And then other people were helping. So coming from that mindset is really going to help you get through this. You do need to set a realistic time frame to digest and commit all of this information. This isn't one of those things where, oh, you've been around the ecosystem for a while. Some of the certs, if you've been around long enough and you have experience, you can, study some of the details and take the certification. This definitely is not like that. There are so many little pieces of information. So be realistic with yourself about how much time it's going to take and just be consistent. And also, I really want to emphasize that it's okay to take the test, not pass, and retry. I had to take it twice. And after taking it the first time, I was able to identify a few areas where I wasn't strong, and I was able to go back and study those. And so I think, in a way, it was almost better that I had to take it twice because I actually sort of learned more in a way. So it's okay to try to take it, and then maybe you don't pass. That's fine. Study a little bit more, and you're going to pass it the second, third. I know people have taken it 5 times. That's okay because you're learning the information as you go, and that's really the most important part. So now I want to stop, take a short break, and find out from you, what is your current mindset? These are some of the common, as I have this conversation with people, thoughts that are going through people's heads. Maybe I'm not even sure where to start. Like, cool, PD1, that sounds great, but where do I even begin? It's a lot of information. Or maybe you're intimidated that you think, no, it's just going to be too hard. I can't do that. Or maybe, you don't think you have enough time to study for it. Or I have questions, but there's no one to ask for help. Who do I go to? So if we can take a short break here and just in the comments, I'm interested in what your, current mindset is about taking on PD1. Go back to my chat window here and just look to see if there's how much time. I'll answer a couple questions here just to give us a little break, and then I'll go back and also see. How much time did you dedicate each day or week to accomplish this? I started with Rad Women Code, and that was like 3 or 4 hours a week because that was a class that we were taking. And also I had some flexibility at work and outside of work to do this. So I would say, I'm guessing, I didn't do it daily, 4 hours a week or so. I studied for a while because I really needed to kind of go back and learn things, and I went to a lot of presentations. Dreamforce and some of the conferences that I went to. How soon after your first attempt did you retake the test? I think it was like 3 weeks. I realized what I needed to study more, and I'll talk about this in a minute in the resources. And so 3 weeks later, I retook it because I felt like I was really prepared, but there's just a few topics that I was missing. And I also worked with my mentor, which I'll talk about in a minute, to help me with those topics. Anita mentions it's a bit of a mountain to climb. That is true, and that intimidated me for a long time, but I can't think of the exact quote, but there's a quote about, like, there's no time to start but now. If you break it down, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, on how to break it down so that you gain some confidence after each layer. After you start seeing that you can understand the concepts, you start to gain some confidence. And I'm telling you, out of all the certifications that I've taken, it's 100% the most impactful. I mean, I have a new job because I got application architect. So it really had a great impact on my career. Is there another way? Denial, must move forward, dreading. Oh, Anita, I'm going to break it down in just a second. I got a slide all about that. I totally understand the dread, but once you get into a flow, and I'll talk about that in a second, it's going to seem doable. And I'm here to tell you that it is. So we'll go back to the presentation here, and I'll definitely come back for some more questions here once we're done. Okay, mastery. Here's what you all want to know. How the heck do you even start this journey when you don't have a coding background? So normally I have this come in layers, but what I did was I took a layered approach. You need to master each of these as you go from the bottom up, to gain some confidence. So the first thing right out of the gate, and this is when I talked about preparation, you need to have the declarative down. You need to understand configuration, so all the declarative configuration stuff that you do as an admin. You need to understand the data model, and you need to understand process automation. So I took this a year ago, so I don't know if they might have a couple questions about flow, but they definitely have questions about when to use low code and when to use code. That's a big topic. And when you take these tests, I've taken enough now. You have to understand that what Salesforce is sort of trying to convey. They want you to take the low code approach when you can. That's definitely the Salesforce way. So knowing that going in, you just need to know the differences in why you would ever need to use code when now you have flow, and especially with all of the new flow features. So that's the first thing you need to tackle. Platform app builder, admin certificate, tackling, feeling comfortable with the basic admin, sort of advanced admin level of configuration, because there's definitely questions about that. It's not all about triggers and Apex at all. There's questions about, that's why it's called platform developer. So there's definitely questions about developing declaratively. So you need to feel comfortable with that. The next thing is the basics, and I'm going to give you some resources for this. Data types, triggers, methods, classes, and loops. You don't need to be able to come to a blank page and write out a trigger on the test. You don't need to, from scratch, be able to know the construct of it and what you're doing. You don't, they're not going to ask you to do that, but you do need to be able to read it, and you do need to be able to understand all of the elements of it. So the best way to do that is hands-on. Trailhead has some great hands-on to help you do that. And of course, I'll talk about this in the resources. Red Women Code is awesome. And there are other resources that I'll talk about to get you familiar with those concepts. That, truthfully, that was one of the hardest parts for me, was that part, is the triggers, just understanding the different elements of a trigger. They're going to, in the test, give you a snippet of code and ask you, like, you have to read through it and find one little problem with it. Or, it's been a year since I've taken it, they will ask you, what this code is going to run, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a 0? Is there going to be an error? Like, what's going to happen with this code? So you need to be able to interpret it. So you don't need to be able to write it, but you need to be able to interpret it. So I hope that gives you some confidence that you can understand that level enough to be able to, and again, the idea behind this test isn't that you're going to go become a full-time developer after you take this test, but you're going to understand when a trigger is necessary, what you're going to be able to read a trigger and understand maybe there's an error, or maybe you need to add a little bit to it. You're going to be able to understand that after this. The next level, these two levels, are testing, debugging, and deployment. That's a big part of it. Understand how to write test classes, how to figure out what's wrong through debugging, and deployment. Definitely questions about deployment environments and when to use what. So that's more studying. That's pretty easy to understand. You just have to get some hands-on with it. That isn't too hard to sort of grasp. Limits, of course, are a big thing. Lots of questions on limits. Order of execution, it's getting longer and longer, and there's a lot of really good charts on order of execution. Definitely need to understand order of execution, because there will be questions that are tricky about where something's happening in the order of execution and what's going to happen as a result. Is this thing going to run again? Or is it going to go to the end? You just need to grasp that. And again, that's a little bit more of a not memorizing, but understanding the logic of why things go through a certain order of execution. And then I think Hussam may have just talked about this, SOCL, SOSL, and DML. Those were, again, hands-on, not ridiculously hard to grasp, but just doing hands-on and understanding the framework of those queries, and also what DML is, when that is going to happen, like in the order of execution. So once you get through that, you've gotten through the first two layers, or sort of the, the second layer, data types, et cetera. That was the hardest for me to sort of grasp. And then you get into this layer of the UI. Now, right before I took the test, they made the UI 25% of the test. And so I sort of freaked out, because that is definitely my weakest area. I was super involved in Visualforce pages as far as, implementing them and having them be part of our solution, but I never really understood what controllers were. Lightning components, Aura, which we didn't use a lot of, and then Lightning Web Components, which was still fairly new. I had no hands-on experience with that. So that was definitely the point of the most hands-on. And again, Trailhead has some really good hands-on modules on that. And I think there's no getting around it that you got to get hands-on. You got to be able to build a simple Visualforce page, standard controller, custom controller, just to understand what those elements are, some of the different elements. You don't have to get fancy, but you have to understand the framework of it. And LWC, again, there's like a framework of things that you use, and Salesforce has some really good resources for that. So that's the point where you got to get hands-on and you got to understand those at a high level. You don't have to come out and build a fancy LWC that does a bunch of logic. You just need to understand what goes into an LWC. And then, I know this sounds like a lot, the top, and this isn't inclusive of everything, I just wanted to give you a sense of sort of the layers. There's just the information that you have to remember. System classes, there's just this list of different system classes, and you got to be familiar with when to use them. Platform events, definitely questions about that. Security vulnerabilities, and best practices. That comes up a lot in any Salesforce test, is the best practices. They want to make sure not that you just know how to do something, but what's the right way to use it. No DML and loops. There's always going to be a question about that. So this kind of gives you an idea. If you start declarative, get your brain around the second layer, data types, triggers, methods, classes, and loops. Again, for me, that was the biggest leap for me, is to learn that. And then these other sections, all of which are outlined in the certification guide. That is how I did it. I took a layered approach, and I just really made sure I understood the next layer before I moved on to the next one, so that I had a sense of accomplishment and confidence to go on to the next layer. So this was my study approach, layering and repetition, and it took a while. You may have heard of Rad Women Code, and I've talked about it a little bit. It's a group. It's the idea behind it was to decrease the gender gap in developers, Salesforce developers. So it is targeted towards women or those who identify as women. And you get into a small cohort. You have 2 coaches, and you get, I want to say it's 5 weeks. I don't remember exactly how many weeks it was, but you're giving coding exercises. And what was great about that was you're given a coding exercise, and it really makes you think. It's not just you staring at a page and getting information. You really have to try to think about how to solve these things and how to write out these exercises. And then you're given feedback. That was the confidence builder right there, is taking Rad Women Code and understanding that there were other people like me without a coding background who wanted to take this on and who wanted to support me. The other thing I did, I used Focus on Force. I found that to be, for this certification, really helpful. What I did was I went through it in every section. If I didn't understand something, I would stop there. I would go outside, and I have some resources for you. Go to a YouTube video or go to a presentation on it or talk to someone about it, to really go and understand it. And then I would come back to Focus on Force. They have really good diagrams. I'm sure a lot of you have seen Focus on Force, but they have really good diagrams, and just the way they lay things out was helpful. And of course, taking the practice tests really get you in the mindset for how you need to approach the test. I did a lot of talking to developers and attending webinars and meetings. One of the other main things I want you to get out of this presentation is that don't be afraid to talk to developers. Everyone that I've met at least, wants to explain things to you. Some are better than others in breaking it down, but luckily I have a developer that I worked with who was great at breaking things down, like, explain it to me like I'm 5. Why would you do this? So don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask it. Don't feel like developers are up on this pedestal and they know all of this crazy coding stuff, and you're down here and you're just never going to understand it. They want to help you, especially in the Trailblazer community. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. That's going to be the key to understanding some of the trickier parts of this. I went to a lot of developer user group meetings, especially with the virtual aspect of things. I would just join random, like New York or San Francisco. I would just join their developer meetings. In the beginning, I had no idea what they were talking about. It was just really over my head. And this is the faith that things are going to become clear. As I went to more, certain themes kept coming up about how to do things, the best way to do things, how to approach things. And that's when things started to become clear for me. So I would invest not only in studying yourself, but going to meetings and watching presentations, and also talking to other people, architects and developers. Those three things together are really going to fill out your study plan. And of course, I had lots of note cards. I just wrote note cards everywhere. So it was really this layering and repetition, as I'm talking about different resources that I went through to finally feel confident enough to take the test. So here's some resources. I'm just going to check and see if we have any questions really quick. Take a minute break here. Oh, Cruz, I have some suggestions for you to groups to share your thoughts and concerns. And more of who. It's good that you're getting started. It sometimes it's a slow start until you start to develop a little bit of confidence that you're going to start learning these things. And again, I have some additional resources for you here that I'm going to talk about right now. Let me go back to my presentation. So here's some resources, and there's a ton out there, but these are some of the ones I use. This is not all inclusive. So if you were to begin and you're like, I don't understand triggers, like what is that thing? Apex Academy by David Liu is really a great place to start. It's like a beginner mindset. He breaks it down. He does a really good job. You write your first trigger and you gain some confidence, like I can do this. I don't have to, have a computer science degree. I can do this. Dreamforce and other virtual meetings, presentation recordings. If you think back to this past year and how many presentations and recordings there are, all of the different community events, there is a ton about different aspects of Apex or different aspects of learning how to code. If you can't find some, I'll make sure that you're able to connect with me and I can recommend some. There's just so many out there. Just watching those. And also the website that Rad Women Code uses, it's called Women Code Heroes. www.womencodeheroes.com. It was written by one of the founders of Rad Women Code, and it breaks it down beautifully, the basics of like data types and triggers. It talks about using Tupperware containers for different types of data, and it really breaks it down and helps you understand it. So those are the three places where I would just start to get your mind around it. Then where? So you've got this initial like, okay, I'm starting to understand some of the basics. Where do I go from there? Rad Women Code, if you're able to join one of those groups, I think they're starting another cohort in August. So be sure to follow them either on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's at Rad Women Code, and you'll find out about the next cohorts that are coming up. Ladies Be Architects, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. It's a group of architects. It's available for everyone. It's just women started it to promote women being architects, but it's available to everyone. They have a platform developer study group playlist that goes over the different sections. That's really helpful. Something that some people don't realize is that Trailhead Live has modules on some of the specific sections the Platform Developer One. So be sure to look at the Trailhead Live calendar, and they also have recordings where they talk about like SOCL queries, or they talk about, very specific aspects of it. They have really good teachers, and that's a good way to learn about some of those really tricky topics that are hard to just learn on your own. Apex Hours is a YouTube channel. They have so much content, and it's really broken down into very specific topics. They have a Salesforce developer training playlist, but also, gosh, it's at least weekly, I think. I see all the notifications that they have different topics that people speak on. That's a great resource. And again, focus on force. You'll find some of these resources speak to you more than others, so just you got to kind of find which one you sort of vibe with. But lots of resources there. Salesforce, of course, has resources. Trailhead, of course. Certification days. My recommendation for Platform Developer 1 certification day, do it towards the end to validate some of your learnings. If you do it early, a lot of it's just going to go over your head because they're sort of confirming what you need to know. So I would do that later on. There's a Trailhead virtual boot camp and a Dev 450 class. If you're able to, that costs some money, but depending on if your employer, you want to invest that, they have a week-long class that you can take through Salesforce. And of course, there's ongoing webinars and user group content. Check your local user group, dev community groups. Also, if they're still doing virtual around, they have topics that you can join on. Virtual user groups, I'm part of the WIT Devs group, Women in Tech Devs. They have monthly topics. on development. And right, check your virtual community group meetings. I'm going to go back to talking about when I didn't pass and then when I passed. What made the difference for me, one, I talked to my mentor, but two, I read the documentation. There's all of these different developer guides. I read through each one of them. They're very approachable. You need to read through those because there are questions directly out of those guides, and they're much easier to read than you think they're going to be. So read those guides. That was the key for me passing the second time. And some of the places that you can get support, Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, very supportive environment. Ohana Slack. There's a Slack channel called Ohana Slack, very active. And there's also the Salesforce XD Discord server, which is also very supportive, where you can ask, specific questions there. I want to make sure I spend a few minutes talking about mentor, because I think this is a piece that's missing for a lot of people. You're trying to study this on your own, and you're getting frustrated. You're not understand something. I was lucky enough to have a mentor who I was able to ask questions of, and that played a huge part for me. The one point I want to make about having a mentor, I've helped people out in the ecosystem who've asked me for help. It's not the mentor's duty to teach you the information. You can't go to them and say, I don't understand triggers. Can you explain it to me? That's too much of a burden on a mentor. The way you're going to get the best experience with a mentor is you need to try to tackle it yourself first, and then you come up with a specific question that you don't understand, and you come to your mentor with specific use cases or questions. That's the way you're going to get the most out of having a mentor. Asking specific questions, and then asking them for real world examples about how they would use, like when it came to Visualforce controllers, I had to ask my mentor, like, why would you do this custom controller over a standard controller? Like, what environment would you do that in? What use case? And that helped solidify the information for me. So asking them for example use cases is really helpful. And how to find a mentor, kind of the standard ways. Do you have somebody at work that you could ask? Don't be afraid to talk to the developers. User group, Trailblazer community. If you're not sure how to connect with someone, talk to somebody in your local user group and they can help you. Kind of that 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon type of thing. Like if they aren't able to, they know somebody who might be able to. That was huge for me. Really quick, I have 1 minute. This is the most important slide. I want to talk about the return on your investment. We'll just go over these really quick. As an admin, you're going to get decisions of clicks versus code, troubleshooting, and providing support. You're going to be able to dig in things that developers have built and understand them and provide support back to other people. As a project manager, the complexity of the solution and the resource time, you're going to understand that better, and you're going to be able to ask questions. As an architect, I mean, it's sort of obvious. These bullet points, you're going to be able to solution, you're going to understand the code solutions being discussed, and you're going to be able to be involved in the discussion. And as a developer, you're on your way, and this provides a solid foundation. So what I want you to walk away with is dive in. Just start doing it. Have faith that things will start to become clear. Start with the basics. Don't be afraid to talk to developers. Share your success and struggles. Twitter, Slack, that's really going to help your mindset, and reach out for encouragement. If I'm going to leave this up here for just a second, if you want to screenshot these are some of the URLs of the resources that I discussed. And I'm also happy to send this to anybody if you want to reach out to me, Twitter or LinkedIn. If you want to DM me, that's the best way to reach me. And I really appreciate you joining, and I wish you the most success on your Platform Developer One journey. And feel free to reach out to me for encouragement or resources. I'm more than happy to help. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.